Okay, so off camera, I asked Gemini to build me up a web view that lets me change some stuff, and I'm just gonna copy it. So I was having trouble understanding what was failing here, and Gemini told me that WebView controller wasn't fully initialized. I guess I'm kind of curious how would I know that that's the problem? So it looks like this is a constructor that takes as an argument maybe some kind of record that has a function, which has only, I guess, one method on permission request. Let me ask, I guess, while I'm here, let me just ask Gemini what's up with this. So I'll say, tell me about this dark code. Right, it is a constructor. This declares a named constructor. Named constructors allow you to have multiple constructors with different names for a class. Okay. See if we can pull out a web page. Dart, named constructor. Is it just named because it takes a specific type? Is it just the same as overloading? That I don't know. Clarifies the purpose of a constructor or allows the creation of multiple constructors for the same class. Their named constructor has a name like point.origin. And it's setting, we've got this colon. This is kind of reminiscent of C++, I think. And you set X and Y to be X origin and Y origin. I don't know if that means that this is a constructor that takes these two arguments. Why do I feel like I don't have a tab for this running devices thing? Oh, well. Okay. There's this function that defines a optional parameter named onPermissionRequest that just takes this thing, returns void. It's optional and can be null. So this from platform creation params is the constructor initializer list. It's used to initialize fields or call other constructors before the body of the constructor executes. In this case, it's calling another constructor called from platform creation params. And we have a constant object, the platform blah 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 WebView controller creation params. I don't know why it has a like function call thing at the end. And then we have on permission request, which I guess will be passed to the from platform construction params constructor. And I'll ask, I guess, some follow-up questions. So why does this platform creation params have a look like a function call? Is it actually a function call? And what does it mean? And if so, what does it mean to be const? I guess it probably means that the value that it returns is const. Not sure what else it could mean. So it's some sort of, I guess, special syntax for chaining constructors. The const keyword indicates that this constructor is a constant constructor. This means that the objects created by this constructor are immutable. I think those are at least conceptually the same as the return value. If you consider the constructor a function, it's possible that it's not literally a function in Dart. And all instance variables must be final. The constructor body must be empty. The constructor call itself must be preceded by const. Then we have some benefits of const. Okay, that's all fine and good. And I'll ask, how can we tell that this is a named constructor? And also, why does it take an argument that looks like curly braces, dot curly braces? I'm right to be curious about these aspects. This AI is pretty ass-kissing. The constructor is named constructor is defined by adding a dot followed by the name after the class name. And so do we actually have that here? I'm not sure. I'm not convinced that that's what's going on. I think this platform, whatever, is a named constructor. I'm not. Okay, so this is actually the default constructor. That makes a lot more sense. Curly braces for arguments indicate that the constructor accepts named parameters. Named parameters are enclosed in curly braces and allow you to pass arguments. Okay, so this is maybe a little bit like keyword arguments in Python. Okay, so what? So what? I don't know. What even was my goal? My goal was to understand why. Okay, so if I want, so this is calling this other constructor, right? So this is calling from platform, Webview controller, etc. So we're calling down to from platform. Ultimately, we've got some function. So let's see, from platform, passing in this dot platform. We check if the permission request is non-null. If so, we do some stuff. But what if it is null? And the platform web view controller extends platform interface. You've got some factory function. I don't know what a Dart. So Dart seems to have syntax for a factory. Dart factory constructors. A generative constructor always returns a new instance of the class, therefore it doesn't use the return keyword. Unlike generative constructors, constructor. A factory constructor uses the factory keyword and uses a return value, a return keyword to return an instance of the class. Okay. So we have an example here. Factory logger takes in a name and calls cache put if absent. The name and I guess like I don't know what these are called, but I'm going to call it a lambda or an anonymous function that it takes no arguments and I guess returns the result of logger dot underscore create name. This is not useful. Okay, this is maybe useful. So factory constructors either create a new instance of a subtype or returns an existing instance from cache. Okay, so we can return from cache. That's probably the main difference. And that is a sensible thing to do if you ask for a platform thing. This is probably an expensive operation. It's asking to create, it's like going underneath the layer of Dart into the native world and asking Android or iOS to create, I guess, a Webview thing. And it's like linking everything up and binding it. And so we can, I guess, probably because this is factory, we could probably return from cache. And that's maybe a little bit like a singleton, solves some of the same problems as a singleton. But presumably there might be another constructor that lets you create another version that's not in cache. And I'm not sure if actually all the cached versions refer to each other. Like if you get two things from cache, I don't know if they're copied or if you modify one, it also modifies the other. Okay. We call this platform interface verify. All right. So then my last question for Gemini is like, this constructor seems to do work that takes time. In particular, it creates a native object. But the constructor is not async as far as I can tell. Is there some indication that this constructor is doing work that would prevent me from calling functions on the constructed object immediately? And I'll try playing music again. I think eventually I might switch to a system where I stream music to Discord and then it's just out of band with respect to the Twitch stream. And that way I don't have to be as concerned about um, licensing because it's not streaming to the stream. So in Dart, constructors can't be async. This is actually a little bit, music is a little bit distracting right now. So they must complete synchronously and cannot be directly perform operations that might take time. So factory constructors can perform asynchronous operations to return an instance, initialize your list. While you can't await and initialize your list, you can call synchronous methods that might perform asynchronous operations internally. Is that true? Okay. So I'll ask, maybe I can ask it to write me the correct version of this code. And this this isn't an important problem in the sense that like this particular version of the problem needs to be resolved, but it's such a gap in my understanding of Dart that I want to make sure that I understand what's going on. I forget how this went. I think there's no. Is this still invalid? I'm not sure that I love having the emulator in this window. So I can ask it to not show the device frame. What is maximize tool window? I don't know. I don't know. We'll keep it above other things, I guess. All right, so that's working on the other screen. And I'll ask it to try to build it. I'll ask it to try to build, and then as it's trying to build, let's see if I can look at the documentation. I don't think in KDE I can just move a single browser window over. That kind of sucks. How am I supposed to live my life? Maybe I'll just minimize it. So I think the example I copied was just in the README. Yeah, we call it control web. Oh, we don't have a variable name. Does that matter? Ugh. Okay, so let's close these, and then maybe I can do. Let's try this. All right, I'm going to change the keyboard shortcuts, which I think, well, maybe they'll just work. Okay, so we have the ability to switch. I'm not sure that I like the sliding animation, although that's perhaps not the end of the world. Okay, so let's try having a few more desktops. And then for whatever reason, I like two being where the AIs live. All right. And then do I want I don't know if I want like this to be in a separate workspace, but we'll get there in a bit. Okay, so it still says that it doesn't like this. ADB is offline. I don't know why that's the case. Let's find our device. I'll power it back on. Maybe I accidentally powered it off. And let's see if we delete this, if that matters. So let's see if Gemini will tell me how to, I'll say rewrite this code so that the constructor returns. I'll rewrite this code without the dot dot notation. Let's see. Okay, so let's try this. And maybe the issue is just that maybe this will work, and maybe the issue is just that the dot dot notation doesn't work with, I don't know, with what? Who knows? So it doesn't like this. And if so, these are the same errors, I guess, that I'm getting up here. The name controller is already defined. So what makes this is the problem that this is a top level thing? Maybe that's the problem. So I'll tell Gemini I get the error that name controller is already defined. Is that because this code is at the top level of a Dart file, or is something else wrong? So declaring at the top level of a Dart file makes it a global variable. What? Where'd you go? So here's a more realistic example. Okay. Declaring a variable at the top level. I'll say, but in the example provided, I only have one declaration of controller. The next call to controller is modifying the declared variable. Is this not permitted at the top level in Dart? Okay, so maybe there is something called controller. Let's try just renaming the variable. Call it potato controller. So when I renamed it, it doesn't rename this. So maybe you just can't. Um, maybe everything at the top level is has to be a function, or so. Dart. I doubt this will return anything. Supports top level functions such as main, as well as functions tied to a class object. You can also create functions within functions. How about Dart global variables? Top level and class variables are lazily initialized. Oh. Lazily initialized. The initialization code runs the first time the variable is used. Okay. So maybe that's the issue. Maybe it's lazy. Well, maybe there's an implicit lazy initialization and I'm trying to use it before it's lazily initialized. So here's an example. We have this string global var is this. So let's just try testing our theory with a simpler example. I can't open a file like that. What? I'll call it global temp to remind me to delete it. Do I need a library's declaration? I don't know. I guess not. String. So this string equals hello. How about an array? Something I can modify. let's see what this says. It just says this appears to be incomplete code. So I think the thing that's happening is there's some issue about the top level, and it is, and maybe IntelliJ is just not giving me great errors about it. So I'll ask Gemini, tell me what can be placed in the top level of a Dart file. Are Dart files executed top to bottom? You can declare variables outside of what? Outside of what? Class? Yeah, a function or class. They become global variables accessible from anywhere in your file. In the file. Does that mean they're not necessarily exported? Again, you have functions, classes, imports, and exports. Dart files are generally executed from top to bottom. However, there are a few important nuances. Execution begins with main. Variable initialization. Top level variables are initialized before the main function is called. Function execution. Functions are only executed when they are called, not necessarily in the order they appear in the file. Class instantiation. Classes are like blueprints. They don't do anything until you create an object of that class. Yeah. So here's an example encounter. Okay. So so modifying your example, can I do the following? Int counter equals 0, counter plus plus. No. Okay. Top level statements are declarations and initializations. At the top level of your Dart file, you're primarily focused on declaring variables, functions, and classes. You can also initialize variables with values. No arbitrary code execution. You can't have a standalone code box or instructions executing directly at the top level. Operations like counter plus plus need to happen within a function or method. Cool. So that solves that mystery. That was probably not worth all the time I put into figuring it out, although now I know a little bit more about Dart. I probably could have learned that by reading a book about Dart or reading a blog post about Dart, but I haven't done that yet. In fact, I'm not even sure if there is a Dart book that's any good. Books about Dart. Apprentice Fundamentals. Okay, data structures and algorithms in Dart. Okay, there's a lot of. Ooh, look at this. Stanislav Chernychev. I forget how to pronounce Russian letters. I think this first part is Ken. I don't know what this gamma looking thing is. I don't think it's an R, but maybe it is. Yeah. The thing that looks like an H is an N, and the thing that looks like a backwards N is an E. And then what is the thing that looks like an R or a gamma? G. But that's so this would be like KNEGA, Knega. A book. Knega. Okay, fine. All right. So there are books about Dart. That's probably a much easier way to learn the basics than floundering. But floundering is what we're doing today. Okay, so we have this WebView controller. I'm going to copy from the other Gemini, which I think is here, this implementation of a WebView that looks at the local directory and loads files and images from the directory. And what is this? This is a class. So I can just grab this and make it its own WebView thing. In fact, I think I want to just completely replace the existing WebView controller. So we've got this my WebView, which is a stateful widget, extends stateful widget, and the state. When we call the method create state just calls this underscore WebView state class constructor. I forget exactly why that's the pattern. Maybe I can look up Flutter. What is it called? Stateful class, stateful widget. So this is a widget, and the create state function has to return state of yellow bird. So state is some sort of templated class, maybe kind of like a dependent type. It's state of something, I guess but it's not, the thing in here is not like a state of int isn't a thing that has int as state, I don't think. And then the state templated class has to override a build method. So when Flutter walks the tree of widgets and calls build, I don't know if it calls build on the stateful widget directly, or if it knows to call the build method only on its state. And it's going to return, in this case, some sort of container. I'm not sure if you have to return a container, but maybe you have to return a widget. Maybe you can look at the implementation of stateful widget. Abstract class, stateful widget, extends widget. So we have some constructor. We have create element. Creates a stateful element to manage this widget's location in the tree. So the stateful element somehow manages the widget's location in the big tree. It is uncommon for subclasses to override this method. And then create state creates the mutable state for this widget at a given at a given location in the tree. So I guess maybe you can have the same widget with different state, and those end up in the tree at different places. Perhaps is what it's saying. So subclasses can override this method to return a newly created instance of their associated state subclass. And you have to have some way of returning it. So I guess you do have to implement something. I don't know if the underscore is like private or what. A framework can call this method multiple times over the lifetime of a stateful widget. For example, if the widget is inserted into the tree in multiple locations, the framework will create a separate state object for each location. Okay? Similarly, if the widget is removed from the tree and later inserted into the tree again, the framework will call create state again to create a fresh state object, simplifying the lifestyle of state objects. So this is a protected factory create state. Protected means what? Const underscore protected equals underscore protected as a function call, used to annotate an instance member in a class or a mixin, which is meant to be visible only within the declaring library. Okay. So let's look at Dart protected. I'm assuming it's somewhat like Java. In Java, here we go, we can use public, protected, and private keywords. In Dart, privacy is at library level rather than class level. So that's different from Java. It means that other classes and functions in the same library still have access. So a data member is either public, not preceded by underscore, or private if preceded by underscore. Don't use underscore on local variables. The private concept is not for local variables. Therefore, avoid using underscore for local variables. Okay. I will avoid that. Here's the real language reference. We have sealed. What is sealed? It means that let's see what is officially going on with the Dart underscore. So is it just a naming convention? It is not just a naming convention. Underscore fields, classes, and methods will only be available in the Dart file where they are defined. It is commonplace to make the state implementation of a widget private. Okay. Dart doesn't have the keywords public, protected, and private. If an identifier, well, this is out of date, or maybe it's Flutter that adds them. Where is this? This is meta.dart in. Yeah, I don't know if this is a separate. I don't know if meta is part of Dart or something else. Okay, so it seems like the underscore actually does make things private. That's fine. I do also want to see the implementation of the state thing. This state. So we have optional type args. Abstract class state. T is a thing that extends stateful widget with diagnosticable. The logic and internal state for a stateful widget. Okay, so state is information that, one, can be read synchronously when the widget is built. Read synchronously, I guess, as opposed to asynchronously. And two, might change during the lifetime of the widget. It is the responsibility of the widget implementer to ensure that state is promptly notified when such state changes using state.setState. State objects are created by the framework by calling statefulWidget.createState method when inflating a stateful widget to insert it into the tree. Because a given stateful widget instance can be inflated multiple times, for example, if it's incorporated in multiple places at once, there may be more than one state object associated with a given stateful widget instance. With a given instance. So I guess the stateful widget has the same instance, maybe because it's immutable. I don't know if it's global, but it can have multiple state objects. Similarly, if a stateful widget is removed, we saw some of that stuff in the other documentation thing. A framework creates a state object by calling stateful widget create state. This is the life cycle. We call create state. The newly created state object is associated with a build context. And this is a permanent association. It will never leave its build context. However, the build context itself can be moved around the tree along with its subtree. At this point, the state object is considered mounted. I'm guessing that it is considered mounted refers back to the first sentence and not the bit about moving. So it's, in other words, it's mounted when it has an associated build context, which is like a lifetime partner. And then the framework calls init state. And that's the method that I think we're going to implement for our web view. Subclasses of state should override init state to perform one-time initialization that depends on the build context or the widget. I don't know if that's supposed to be of the widget or the widget, which are available as the context and widget properties. I guess it really does mean or, respectively, when the init state method is called. And then the framework calls did change dependencies. Subclasses of state should override did change dependencies to perform initialization involving inherited widgets. Inherited widgets. I'm not sure if I have to worry about that right now. At this point, the state object is fully initialized, and the framework might call its build method any number of times to obtain a description of the user interface of the subtree. State objects can spontaneously request to rebuild their subtree by calling their setState method, which indicates that some of their internal state has changed in a way that might impact the user face in the subtree. During this time, a parent widget might rebuild and request that this location in this tree update to display a new widget with the same blah, blah, blah. Okay. Fine. And so the thing that state is, we've got this T type argument, and we've got this function. I guess this seems to be some sort of getter. In fact, it's called get. And I don't know what this is doing, but this is like widget goes to underscore widget. And then I don't know if this is supposed to be like the return value, or if you're calling get with an argument that is widget, you have to specify which widget to get or something. And then we have this, I guess, nullable T question mark thing, which is underscore widget. And maybe the fact that this getter, when we call get, we're going to call it with an exclamation mark indicating that it cannot be null. Okay. So that's useful. And then the question is, what I want to do is I want to grab documents from the app directory in Android and display them. And it's not immediately obvious to me why we need a stateful widget to do that, because remember back to the last video, if you think through what we were doing, we were able to load the Flutter web page into the stateless widget. So it's a stateless widget in an important sense. It doesn't have state from like Dart's point of view. There's no state to keep around. But it does like load in a thing that has state, like the web page. And it's not like a pure function or anything. It depends on the outside world having network access and all that stuff. So it's not clear to me why loading something from disk is like intrinsically different from that. But the I think the conceptual answer is that the the disk itself is a form of state. You could argue that the Flutter web page is also a form of state, but we'll ignore that argument. For now, the disk itself is a form of state. It can change at runtime. And so the fact that we're calling this function to get the Android directory um, requires that to be stateful. And then the maybe more the less conceptual answer is that there are not initialization functions for stateless widgets. So there's no place to place the logic that gets the Android directory. And so like even if we don't have real state in a meaningful way that's different from the stateless case, we do need the hooks. And so we have them. Okay. So most of this is straightforward. We have these late variables. These are going to be late binding variables. The controller, because we need to construct it. And we have some HTML content that I guess we're going to read from disk. And then we have this init state hook, which is the hook that's provided to us from the stateful widget, or rather from ultimately it's because the stateful widget has a life cycle, but this hook, I guess, is part of the state class proper as opposed to the stateful widget class. And then we're just calling we're calling the super function, and then we're calling init platform state, which is, I think we named this function as opposed, it's not like overriding anything else. I think we could call this like init anything else, but I'm not going to refactor it. And we get the directory, the application support directory. This is an asynchronous function. I guess we're allowed to call async functions in init state. It's void, so it doesn't return anything. Protected and must call super. What is this? Must not be async. Set state, I guess, must not be async. So this is a little bit unusual. I guess it seems like Dart non-async functions can call async functions. Is that right? Dart libraries are full of functions that return future or stream objects. I'll look for Dart can a synchronous function call an async function. That didn't really work, so I'll ask Gemini. I asked it like a crazy person, but Gemini says, yes, a synchronous function can call an asynchronous function in Dart. However, there are important considerations, blah, 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 blah. When a synchronous function calls an async function, the async function starts its operation and returns a future right away. The synchronous function continues executing without waiting for the asynchronous operation to complete. If the synchronous function doesn't await for the asynchronous result, you have a couple of options for handling it. You can ignore it. You can, if you need to use the result, you can use then method of the future to register a callback. And I think that this just registers a callback, and it doesn't like make the synchronous function wait. You cannot directly use the await keyword inside the synchronous function. Await can only be used with an async function to pause execution until a future completes. And then it has some examples. So main is synchronous. It calls the asynchronous fetch data, and then the then method is used. Okay, so that that makes sense. Except what prevents the main function from exiting before then completes the That's a great question. It gets to the heart of how Dart handles asynchronous operations. It really is a great question. Here's the breakdown. So there's an event loop to manage asynchronous operations. I think this is standard. The event loop is constantly running process that checks for completed asynchronous tasks like features and executes their associated callbacks, like the then callback. Even though the main function might finish executing its asynchronous code, the Dart program doesn't immediately terminate. The event loop keeps the program alive, waiting for pending asynchronous operations to complete. Okay. Once all asynchronous operations are complete, then there are no more events in the event loops queue, the Dart program terminates. Okay. That's reasonable, so fine. Okay, so that we have this init platform state. Back to the code. We're going to call HTML file.read as string. Presumably, this is going to read the file as a string. Reads the entire file contents as a string using the given encoding. By default, UTF-8 returns a feature of string that completes with the string once the file contents have been read. It says has, but I think they mean have. And then we've got this logic to replace the image path in HTML with local file paths. This seems like we can get around it. This seems like unnecessary to me. It seems like we could just we could just have the HTML files already refer to where the images are stored in like with relative paths. And that should work. However, it has this logic to do this regex replace. Anytime source is equal to a thing, we match it, and then we add the directory path there. And I asked it, why have you done this to me? And it had a reasonable answer, which is that it's not confident that that since we're using the path provider, it's not confident that that is robust enough for you to be able to encode a path. So, for example, if on the server we said the path was foo/bar, that might change on the disk. But it does seem like as long as we set the base URL to the thing that we got from the app directory, that this should be okay. So it says some of the considerations for why I chose to replace instead of having relative paths is platform compatibility. Ensure that Webview on different platforms can handle relative paths correctly. Performance, there may be performance considerations, especially for large HTML files or many images. I don't see how that really fits in. And security, be cautious about exposing the application support directory path. Okay, but I think that unless I'm missing something, we'll just try to do it this way. I don't know if I want unrestricted JavaScript. I'm pretty sure I don't need it. I'll try moving Android Studio to its own place. See how that works. Let's try some house music. Okay, so let's take this. So we'll take this load HTML string thing and replace it with this call to load HTML string that has the directory path. And in init platform state, it seems like we're calling, or rather defining, set state. I just deleted the thing that created HTML with local paths. And the state includes HTML content. So I guess we're keeping that state as a string. And that's the state. I guess if we ever do change the controller, I guess we can change that bit of the state too. So set state, is this something we have to call? We have to override, or is it just a thing that's... So set state says notify the framework that the internal state of this object has changed. And so you just give it brackets and each variable that, So I think this, again, this is maybe this empty type is to indicate that it's a void function, which we saw somewhere. It's like void callback. And then I guess these are like the arguments to it. That has this like kind of somewhat JavaScripty feel, or like record syntax feel. And then I don't know if you have multiple variables, if you have a comma or what. Maybe they have... We'll see. We'll look at record syntax. Yeah, okay. So it looks like they're... Oh, no. Okay, so records are enclosed in parentheses. So what are the curly braces? I guess they're called named parameters. Seems like they're comma separated. Okay. let's get rid of this logic to play stuff, and then we'll just set the state to HTML string. Do I not have subword? All right, so it doesn't seem to have that. And now that I'm thinking about this, let me try one more setting change. I guess I can't do that. All right, whatever. I'll do that. I'll figure out that out later. Okay. I guess I don't have subword navigation. I'll have to do this like a crazy person. All right, there we go. So HTML content is just set to HTML string. I don't know if we really needed to have this separate string, although it seems fine. And what? And what? So init state, I think we looked at and is not async. So that means that it's not actually going to wait for init state to complete. It's going to call init state and then go along with its merry way. What are you doing? There you go. Let's see if there's any like gotchas with respect to using init state. Is there a way to load async data in init state method? I can create this and call it in init state. So this person says, in this case, build executed before async method completed. So in this case, they have some async method, which is, I guess, this one, add post frame callback. That's setting current user to account. As of now, using then seems to work. And if your async function not return anything, then use when complete instead. I personally prefer to streams as much as possible. Well, this works for demonstrative purposes. You can use Stream Builder to do this. This will run the builder method whenever the data in stream changes. So you have Stream Builder of list of content, get contents list, build context. Final block provider, block provider.of. Okay, so people are essentially saying to use more frameworks and stuff. You can create an anonymous function. Okay, so it seems like it is possible for the way that Gemini coded this up. It seems like it is possible for build to be called before init platform state is complete. So let's ask Gemini about that. So say in your implementation of my Webview state, is it possible that build is called before init platform state completes? And if so, what will happen? Yes, it's entirely possible that build method is called before init platform state completes. This is a common challenge when dealing with asynchronous operations in Flutter. If build is called before init platform state finishes, then there might be null safety errors. The controller and HTML content variables might be null, leading to runtime errors. We might have an empty web view. Performance issues. If the asynchronous operation takes a significant amount of time, the app might feel unresponsive. To address these issues, you can employ several techniques. You can wrap the web view in a future builder to handle the asynchronous operation and display a loading indicator while waiting. You can use a state management solution like Provider, Riverpod, or Block to manage the loading state and the web view content. I think that something like Provider, Riverpod, and Block, I think that these have their place. I'm going to guess that the main audience for them is like the huge number of like mobile app development shops who bang out lots of different mobile apps, and these libraries sort of give a unified and familiar way of managing state between those apps. And that doesn't always mean that it's like the best practice to use them. And I'm going to try to avoid them just because I don't like having extra dependencies. And then we have error handling. Implement proper error handling to gracefully handle exceptions that might occur during the asynchronous operation. And then it gives an example using Future Builder. Okay, so where's Future Builder? So we have future of string HTML underscore HTML content future. And then we have the load HTML content is, I guess, identical probably to what was before. And then in build, we return future builder of string. I don't know if future builder is called that because it's building a future, or if it's called that because it's a future that completes the build command. But at any rate, in future builder, you tell it what the future is, I guess. It's a future builder of string. This is a HTML content future is a future of string. And the builder, maybe it's called future builder because it has a future and a builder. The builder is a thing that takes I guess, a context and a snapshot. I don't know where they come from, but I guess whatever the logic is that handles trees and knows about future builders supplies them. And we say if snapshot connection state is equal to connection state dot waiting, then we'll return const of circular progress indicator. So that's going to be some spinny guy that tells you that you're waiting on something. Else if snapshot has error, I don't know why it's called snapshot, but this is kind of like a loading data pattern. So if the data loading stuff has error, then we're going to return some text error. Else, HTML content is set to be the snapshot data, which we assert is non-null by having this exclamation mark. And we set the final controller to be this Webview controller. So we're creating a new Webview controller, it looks like. And then we return the Webview widget. That's not bad, except I'm not sure that, I don't know how expensive it is to create a controller and a new Webview widget. And this is maybe being called every time the thing is built. Let's return to our code for a second. No. Let's check out the future builder code. It behaves identically to a stream builder, configured with future $.asStream, except that snapshots with connection state.active may appear for the latter, depending on how the stream is implemented. Okay, so it seems like maybe Stream Builder is part of Flutter itself. A Stream Builder of T class is a widget that builds itself based on the latest snapshot of interaction with a stream. This is just basically somebody reading the documentation. Okay, a stream must have been obtained earlier, for example, state.initState, or did update widget, or did change dependencies. It must not be created during the state.build or stateless widget.build method call when constructing the stream builder. A general guideline is to assume that every build method could get called every frame and treat omitted calls as an optimization. Widget rebuilding is scheduled by each interaction using state.setState, but is otherwise decoupled from the timing of the stream. The builder is called at the discretion of the Flutter pipeline. Okay, so I'm just kind of like looking quickly here. So for future builder, widget rebuilding is scheduled by the completion of the future using state.setState, but is otherwise decoupled from the timing of the future. The builder callback is blah, 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 blah. And here it says widget rebuilding is scheduled by what? Each interaction. What is an interaction? So the stream is a source of asynchronous data events. The stream provides a way to receive a sequence of events. Each event is either a data event, also called an element of the stream, or an error event, which is a notification that something has failed. So stream of T is, we have this optional map of T. So I guess T is the type. provide an asynchronous sequence of data. So for example, some stream is a stream of int, async. We'll set var sum equals 0. We're going to await for final value in stream, sum plus or plus equals value, final value in stream. I don't know if await for is a separate thing from await and then passing in a for loop, but I'm guessing that it somehow knows to that the stream can continue to receive values. I don't know how it knows when the stream is done. Yeah, so await for seems to be a separate thing called an asynchronous for loop. Iterates over the events of the stream, like the for loop iterates over an interval. For example, blah, 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 blah. And the following example tests the previous code by generating a simple stream of integers using an async function. So we have this count stream. That's just calling yield. And how does it know when it's done? I guess there's through the whatever the async, whatchamacallits, the async logic, I guess, somehow knows that there's like the equivalent of a return from the async function. So I don't think I need a stream. It seems like future builder is probably more what I want. But I do have some questions for Gemini. Like, I have a couple of questions. One, should I consider using stream builder instead of future builder? And two, should I be concerned about the calls to the Webview constructor, Webview controller constructor? No, Webview controller and Webview widget constructors in builder. Are these, in particular, does builder get called every time the build method is called? And if so, can I optimize the away the construction, the work of constructing new objects? These are great questions. Thank you, Gemini. So for loading HTML content once a feature builder is generally sufficient, it's designed to handle asynchronous operations that complete with a single result. Use a stream builder if you need to update the HTML content dynamically based on user actions or external events. You want to display a continuous stream of data or updates. Okay, so I'll circle back to this because I do eventually want to do this, and we might as well get the stream builder versus future builder right. And then for the question about the constructors, yes, the builder function can be called multiple times. This is normal Flutter behavior. To optimize performance, I could avoid creating new instances, create the controller once in an init state, and then use it. Yeah, that's what I'd like to do. Consider caching the Webview widget if possible. And so we've got this state. We create it in here, and we have this load content. Okay, so the controller, we have this load HTML string, and then we create a new Webview widget with the controller, if I have a Webview widget that references some controller, is it sufficient to call controller that load HTML string on a new string to change the Webview content? Do I always need to create a Webview widget object after calling controller that load HTML string? Calling controller load HTML string with new content is sufficient to update the web views widget. You don't necessarily need to create a new Webview widget after this. The Webview widget essentially serves as a bridge between your Flutter application and the web content displayed. Okay. Okay, fine. And then I guess my last real question is, I do intend to change the HTML loaded in the web view in response to user events. This is an app, it's a bookmarking app, and the user may switch between bookmarks. In this case, is Stream Builder better, or can I still stick with Future Builder and use some other mechanism to change the content, such as calling set state once the web view is built? You're not programmed to assist with that. The Stream Builder is designed to efficiently handle multiple updates to the UI based on the stream of data. Real-time updates, state management. And so we've got initial bookmark content, and then we might handle changes. Switch bookmark, the void function that calls load bookmark content, which is here. And then in Stream Builder, if snapshot has data, then we'll load HTML string snapshot data. It's possible to use Future Builder with SSD, but it can be less efficient for frequent content changes. You would need to create a new feature for each bookmark switch. Is that right? Because the feature is, yeah, I guess so, because the feature is called when build is called. And build is called with each set state, right? Yeah. So what's the downside? The downside is the user might go crazy and like click a bunch of articles to switch between them rapidly, faster than it can render, especially on a slow network. And then that could build up a bunch of features, and maybe that's bad. So suppose the user is on a slow network and it takes a few seconds to load an article. The user, in frustration, tries switching between 10 different articles. Walk me through how Future Builder and Stream Builder would handle this situation. For example, is the following understanding more or less correct? So Future Builder will create 10 new futures. Each one will be somehow queued, perhaps in the event loop, and the app will try to load each article. Let's say it takes 5 seconds to load an article. Before moving on to the next, resulting in 50 seconds of wait time before the final article is rendered. Stream Builder will not create new features, but will still try to render each article in turn, resulting in about 50 seconds of wait time. And I guess there's a follow-up question. Is there a way to have each requested article change cancel the previous request? My understanding is mostly correct. Indeed, each time the user switches articles, a new feature is created to fetch the content. There's a queued execution. It's typically queued and executed asynchronously. The user rapidly switches between the articles. The app will end up with multiple ongoing network requests, potentially leading to a cumulative wait time as I described. In Stream Builder, it establishes a single stream for fetching article content. When a new article is requested, you typically add a new event to the stream. It will then process these events sequentially, one after another. And while it can help manage the flow of data, it doesn't inherently prevent the issue of loading multiple articles simultaneously. And then both Future Builder and Stream Builder can benefit from a mechanism to cancel previous requests. So Future Builder has, I guess, cancellation tokens. You can use cancellation tokens or a similar mechanism to cancel in-flight future requests when a new request is made. And you can have a custom future implementation. The stream controller can be used to cancel ongoing operations or emit a specific event to signal cancellation. Implementing a debouncing mechanism can help reduce the frequency of requests. So debouncing, I guess, is mainly about deduplication. I think unless it means just we'll ignore, instead of emitting events, maybe it means we'll just like in a period of however many milliseconds, we might get 4 requests and we only issue the last one or whatever. So there's some additional considerations like loading indicators, error handling, caching. Okay. And then I'll say, based on the above, would you recommend using Stream Builder or Future Builder? Okay, so I'll ask it to show me. Okay. Show me an implementation using Stream Builder. Okay. And there was I saw some uh, YouTube video this morning. This one. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to play a YouTube video, but they put it on silent. So this person is building a Wikipedia Explorer thing, which has state of I don't know if this is available on GitHub somewhere. Let me try looking for Wikipedia Explorer state. This seems like it. Emily Fortuna. This seems to be her, or a replicant posing as her. And she has some website, which maybe does not have a valid HTTP cert. Okay, so here's the code. It's like is this like a gist? This is a GitHub gist. And here's the wiki browser. And then what? This is a code lab and a cookbook of useful Flutter samples. So this code lab, I think, is something I did a long time ago. I don't think this is going to be super informative. I'm sure they've changed little bits of it. And this cookbook looks possibly useful. So I'll bookmark it. Okay, and let's look at this code. Here's the main, or at least the snippet of the main function. So we have this Wikipedia Explorer, which extends stateful widget. And the create state function returns the Wikipedia Explorer state. We've seen this before. The favorites is a set, I guess, so they don't like persist across runs of the app. And we have a completer. What is a completer? I don't know. Maybe it's in lib. A completer is a way to produce future objects and to complete them. Okay, so this is just completing the features. And I guess is part of Dart async. Okay, so it has a completer of Webview controller. So it's a thing that can, when you ask for a feature, it can provide one, essentially. And then we've just got build. We are not doing any sort of future stuff. And the scaffold has an app bar. There's a drop-down menu. I guess the app bar has I guess actions is part of the app bar that gives you a drop-down menu, which has navigation controls, which I guess is initialized from controller feature. And so is menu. And the body is a web view with an initial URL, which is the Kraken article on Wikipedia, I guess the monster Kraken, and an on web view created, which has this controller complete web view controller. Is there just an on web view created? A WebView controller instance can be obtained by setting the WebView.onWebView created callback. So this may not exist anymore. When was this answer written? 2021? So maybe this is using WebView Flutter Max. This is 6 years ago. So I guess stuff has changed. See the pub spec. WebView Flutter 0.1.1. Okay, so it seems like whatever on WebView created is no longer a thing. Maybe that stuff uh, predated async stuff in Flutter. But at any rate, let's see if there's anything else we can learn from this. So we do have this on WebView created, which will complete this future, and a floating action button, which is just calls bookmark button. And we do have this future builder, but this is in menu. So on Webview, created is available in 0.1.1. And that changed. When does it change? Presumably by 1.0. Nope. What about by 2.0? Still there? What about 3.0? You still have it there. Surely by 4.0, it's been removed. Yeah. Okay, so somewhere between 3 and 4. See if we can pick on 3.0.4. Okay, so somewhere between 3.0.4 and the 4.0. This is archived. So it's no longer in packages WebView Flutter. Where is it now? So it's now in packages instead of plugins. Okay, I don't know if they have the back history here. Let me try signing in to GitHub here. Okay, so we have some tests, some stuff that's in legacy. Okay, so there's still references in the legacy thing. There doesn't seem to be any issues associated with this. Does awaiting load request work for you? In this example, init state sets underscore controller to Webview controller, then calls load request. Then it will log something, so it'll print that it's loaded. And what? I guess maybe the controller is cheap to create, and really we just need to call set state. Okay, so this is maybe why the relationship between the controller and the widget has changed. So an asynchronous callback to get the controller no longer makes sense. Okay, so if you have a use case that can't implement with the new APIs, please, yeah, in version 3.0 and above. I did read this before, but I guess I didn't really connect with this thing I was looking at. So in 3.0 and below, I mean, WebView controller could only be retrieved in a callback after the WebView was added to the widget tree. Now, WebView controller must be instantiated and can be used before it's added to the widget tree. So see usage section above for an example. The WebView class has been removed and it's been split into two. Okay. So maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe none of this matters. Maybe I don't even need future builders or anything like that. Maybe all I need to do um, is load some stuff. Let's refactor this. Or I guess not really refactor, but change the behavior of it. So when we call set state setting HTML content to HTML string, then what's going to happen? Well, we have this WebView controller, and we're calling load HTML string on it. I see. So part of the problem is what? That I don't want to. So when I call set state and change the HTML content, it's in general not going to call load HTML string on the controller. So what is it? What I want is like a version of set state that a version of set state that does what? that calls some other method. So how do I think about that? So what kind of object is Webview controller? I think it's just a regular class, right? Let's start a new Dart, a new Gemini chat. So in Dart, in Flutter, I have a Webview controller. I want to make a web view that that I can run, that I can load content at runtime. I know that the Webview controller has a load. Let's just pretend that we're calling load URI. Is it current URL? Is it load file? Load request. It is a load request method. Is there a way? So should I do something like wrap it in a stateful widget? So I can call set state some URL to have it load the URL contained in some URL. Okay, so in this example, it has this function load URL, which calls set state of void and then passing underscore URL and then calling controller load request URI.parse URL. I don't know why it's not highlighting the Dart code. Okay, so I'm not sure that this is how I'm supposed to use set state, but let's take a look at set state again. So set state takes any void callback function. It's an error to call this method after the framework calls dispose. Okay. If you just change the state directly without calling setState, the framework might not schedule a build, and the user interface for this subtree might not be updated to reflect the new state. Generally, it is recommended that the setState method only be used to wrap the actual changes to the state, not any computation that might be associated with the change. For example, here a value used by the build function is incremented, and then the change is written to disk, but only the increment is wrapped in setState. So in setState, you increment the counter, and then you get the directory and write it to disk. Sometimes the changed state is in some other object not owned by the widget state, but the widget nonetheless needs to be updated to react to the new state. This is especially common with listenables, such as animation controllers. In such case, it is good practice to leave a comment in the callback passed to setState that explains what state changed. So void underscore update, call setState with nothing, the animation changes. Animation add listener update. It was originally called Mark Needs Build. Okay. But what can the function do? So I guess that what I think Gemini is telling me that I can do what I asked it to do. That doesn't necessarily mean that what I asked it to do is reasonable. And I guess my concern is that this doesn't actually change the state of the thingamajiggy. Does it? And also, what actually happens when you call setState? What does the implementation look like? So you look for some debug stuff. There might be error stuff if the this is some assertion. So we try to get the result of the function as dynamic, but it's a void callback. So what's the result? I guess it can be a future. A void callback is just any void function. So how can I return a future? I guess that depends on how futures are implemented. At any rate, it's going to call the function here, which is going to kick off whatever you pass into setState. It's going to get some question mark object. If the result is a future, then it's an error. We ignore other types of return values that you can do things like setState. Okay, x equals 3. I guess maybe Dart returns the last thing in the stanza. Then we return true, and then we say element, non-null element needs, mark needs build. So really we're just calling a function and ignoring the result unless it's a future. Okay. So it seems like I can legally call this load URL thing here. But I'll say regenerate this, but highlight the Dart code. Okay. So here, and then where is load URL called? then I'll ask, should I call controller that load request inside of set state, or is it better to do this? And then I'll just have this same implementation, except I'm going to close off it's better to call it inside the set state block. By placing the URL update and load request in the set state, you can maintain a consistent state within the widget. This ensures that the that the widget's UI reflects the current URL and loading state accurately. It may lead to some performance bottlenecks. Okay, and then maybe the last thing I'll do is take a look at the example from the tutorial. So this also has the favorite button. Maybe that's what the Wikipedia thing was doing too. We also have the menu options. We have on URL change. I think I was asking about this and doc region stuff the other day. I think that's just like directives to some preprocessor for processing documentation that Google is using. Okay, so even in this example, I think we just load one URL. Okay, so we have this WebView container. Okay, so the Stack Overflow is asking a related question. It was asked 5 years ago, so the library has changed since then, but I'm curious to see what they say. So I had a similar situation, except I wanted a new URL to be loaded in my WebView when I selected an item from a drop-down menu. How I did this was to create an instance of WebView controller. And they just called controller load URL in set state. I guess there's not really a reason to have the URL separate. Load URL function can't run well in iOS app. I have platform exception. Failed parsing. So this seems to be like they passed in some bad URL. And then do I still have Wikipedia Explorer? Because they must, when she changes bookmarks. So in this example, they have a favorite button, but it does nothing. But in the Wikipedia browser, I think she can load from the video. I believe she picked stuff from her bookmarked things. There's some set, right? Set of string favorite underscore favorites. We add some URL. And here. Oh, well, she's using Future Builder. We're going to return Future Builder, which has the WebView controller feature. What is this? Is this menu? Yeah, class menu is a stateless widget. Huh. Actually, this is not how I thought that this would go. Okay, but at any rate, we have this menu, which is a stateless widget. And I guess when you call build, it's going to return a feature builder with some context, which has a build context and an async snapshot of Webview controller, which is the controller. And if we don't have data, then we just return an empty container, I guess. Otherwise, we return pop-up menu button of string. And on selected, we just do dispatch based on if the value is the email link, then we're going to get the current URL. And we're going to launch mail to, which I don't know what that does in Dart or Android. I'm guessing that pops open a mail client. Otherwise, here's the logic that I was looking for. I think maybe not. We're gonna on the navigator. We're gonna push a material page route, passing in the builder in the context. It's gonna return the favorites page. I guess that's the page of your favorites. And we're gonna remove the current snack bar. And if the new URL is non-null, then we're gonna call controller.data load URL on it. And I guess you can do that because this is an async function. And that's called essentially in the builder. I don't know how much any of this matters from a performance point of view. And I don't know what this function is, but it's somehow, it seems to be getting the new URL seems to be the the thing you selected from the favorites page. Okay, so let's just try. Let's just try things. So in set state, I don't need to keep a separate reference to the HTML string. I just need to call controller. I guess I'll do bang.load HTML string. No. Yeah. I'll get rid of this. This call is set state, and then let's rethink this whole thing. I want a directory. Okay, and then I guess that Do I need to call sets? Do I need to call set state inside of init platform state? Let's look up some Flutter examples. I shouldn't have searched for init platform state. I should have just searched for init state. So here in init state, they're setting data, but they are not calling set state on it. I'm guessing that we don't actually need to call set state here. That's just a guess. It's really just a guess. So let's unwrap this, not call that there, and we'll set directory to be equal to this thing. Okay, so now we're setting the app directory. We're getting this HTML file, which I don't think we need. Oh, well, maybe we do. And we'll do a void. I'll call it load HTML file. The directory has its own thingamajig. There's probably also one for a file, right? Maybe a path? Reference to a directory or folder on the system. Here's that thing on Dart files. There's a file, capital F file. And this we'll call set state. And it will do I like string file name. So we'll set the HTML file here, I guess outside of set state. Then we will read it as string. This, I think it needs to be marked as async. And then on the controller, we'll call load HTML string. So it doesn't like these braces in string interpolation. I guess maybe they needed them here because there's a dot or something. So this can cause an error, presumably read as string. It returns a future of string. Yeah, but what happens if what happens if it fails? Or maybe it's file that fails. Well, they can both fail, right? Dart read as string error. I guess maybe the errors are handled by the feature library. Is there just characteristic ways that a feature can fail? I guess it can be completed with null. Futures and error handling. Warning, you don't need this page if your code uses the language's asynchronous support, async await and error handling using try catch. Incorrectly using an asynchronous function. The following shows the wrong way. Later, you'll fix the example using async and await. Fetch user order as a future string. Future.delayed and then large latte. So create order message. Why is that wrong? Maybe because this is going to return, this is going to print a future. So we need to await it. Completing with an error. If the asynchronous operation performed by the function fails for any reason, the future completes with an error. I'll start a new chat with Gemini. I'll say, tell me how to create an example in Dart of using read as string on a file and show how to handle errors. Uh, so it's defining this read file as string as async. And if the file exists, we do some stuff. Otherwise, we print some stuff. So this is using try and catch. Okay, so it says to use try and catch to catch errors. So I guess we'll do that. Okay, and so it doesn't like this because I don't know if there's if it's a bad idea to call set state in a try block. I guess maybe it doesn't matter. I'll ask Gemini anyway. Say, what do you think about this logic? Should I be concerned about calling that state inside a try block? It's generally acceptable. I can consider caching or debouncing. Yeah, okay. Okay. So do I expect this to work? Well, no, there's no index.html file. And I'm not using my WebView state anywhere. Let's change my WebView to Lector WebView. And let's I'll make a thing called temp helper write index, which will take no arguments. And it will get the app, the we'll get the directory. And a reference to the index.html file. And we'll just call await write a string, and I guess this contents is probably the contents of the string, and then I'll just write hello world. And then we have to call this. And I forgot a semicolon. Okay, and that works. That's mildly actually surprising. It took me a long time to look stuff up and figure out the right plan of attack, but once I found it just a few lines of code to get everything to work. This doesn't allow you to change anything. Let's check that. Let's check that file changes work the way that I want them to. So let's make a list of messages. And then I assume that there's some like for all loop. There must be some iterator stuff. I guess I just needed in parentheses or something. Okay, so we're going to write a bunch of files, and then we're going to change. I guess I want the other kind of for loop. For var I equals 0, so it's just like C++. I'm not sure how to get messages that length or uh, length. Okay. Okay, so that'll write some files. And And what? So I'll ask Gemini to create some timer logic for me. So create a timer in Dart that chooses a random element of a list every 2 seconds. So I'll just pop this in a future thingy. I assume I need to keep a copy of it, but I'm not sure. Is this inclusive or exclusive? 0 is inclusive. Max is exclusive. You know what? Since we've loaded with base path, do I really need the directory? I think I do. And did we load with base path? No, we didn't. So let's do it this way, and then I'll fix it. So we're getting an error. Controller has not been initialized. Why would it not be initialized? I get that I didn't call this thing. So this initializes controller. Oh, here. So load HTML file. But I can't. I call then. Is it because I'm not calling await? So I can't await it. That's fine. Can I call await here? What if I just sleep? What is duration? Okay, so now I can't open some paths. I guess did they not get written? So these are being written, and we're getting the application support directory. Writing F and then some number, and it says F0. Let's just try printing the path and see if we get. So it seems to be failing in the in this file. What if we don't try to write it? So I see that there's this exception, but I don't think it's telling me what's trying to access that. Maybe something about hot reload is broken. So I am getting this error that this controller is not initialized. That does seem like an issue. I don't know if that's an old issue. Let's try restarting from scratch and clearing the log. Yeah. Okay, so I'm still getting it. Mm, so this is being called, this init platform state is being called, I guess. Why don't we just set it here? Can we do this? Okay, it seems to like that. Controller doesn't actually need to be late initialized. It didn't like that I was trying to write these uh, functions, these files. But now I don't seem to be getting the errors that I got before. So it did hot reload, but is it actually doing anything? Let's log every time the timer goes off. Okay, and we get these path not found exceptions. And why is it going up to 3? Oh, first of all, well, yeah, why is it going up to 3? So we are awaiting write as string. So maybe the thing that's causing this to, no, I don't think so. This is some file we're calling load HTML file. Oh, I see. I'm doubling the path. I'm just supposed to be passing the name of the HTML file without the path. Is that actually how I want it to work? That I don't know. So I do see the timer called. It's still failing to load these HTML files. Okay, so let's stop it. Where's the this timer thing? It's going to try to load the random file, which now no longer has the path appended to it. When we go down to load HTML file, we do append the path. That should be correct. It's the app directory path. And maybe that this already, when I call write as string, may already write in the app directory path. But I don't think so. Well, let's find out. Maybe I need to give it the file mode. So here the file name is just the name of the like output.txt and not the full path. Here is the same thing. So maybe I am adding, so maybe this is also supposed to just take the file name. Okay, and now it's complaining that it can't read only as opposed to the file not existing. And so now I think I just need to pass in the that I want to open it in write mode. Or maybe not. Maybe it's trying to write it in some root directory. Am I just not calling this function? I think I am. Oh, it is working. There we go. I don't know what I. Okay, so it is able to switch between them. I don't see any obvious like uh, flickering or fluttering or anything like that. So we'll just assume that that's okay for now. We'll get rid of these temp functions. Get rid of the print functions. We still don't have an index.html file. I could solve that pretty quickly by having an asset, something in the assets directory. And also I didn't do the base name thing. So let's check the base name situation. Oh, you know what? This is probably failing because the HTML, these files already existed once it ran successfully. So maybe if I had opened them up in append mode, I would not have gotten that error or something like that. Base URL. And I guess it's a URL, right? So it's going to be maybe parsed. So maybe I just use the file, the file URI scheme. So let's look up the HTML file, Flutter, base URL. All right. I don't. Why is this showing up in search? It doesn't actually have anything that I'm looking for. Am I misspelling it? Base URL, space URL. So I guess it's just setting base URL to the directory path and not using a URI scheme. We can try that. Actually, uh, you know what? It may be the case that when you create a file, it may already be in the base directory. What happens if we just do this? I'm guessing this won't work. Path not found. I don't know if logcat searches the console or if it I guess not. Okay, so this doesn't tell me the full path. Is there even a full path? We have some path. See, direct recurrent. If it's absolute, it will be immune to changes. Okay, so we can use an absolute path. I don't know why the absolute path thing didn't seem to be working before. Maybe I had made some error that I wasn't seeing. Actually, let's go back. Oops. Okay, so so the app data directory does have the absolute. It does start with a slash, I guess, which is what my question was going to be. I don't know how to test this base URL here because I need to include something in the HTML file that refers to another file, like an image. So I guess I'm just not going to test it right now. So, but um, that will have to be tested at some point. Let's just get rid of the temp stuff and I'll call it a day here. All right, so let's go ahead and commit these thingamajiggies. I guess you commit pubspec lock. Okay, all of these look related to the changes I just did, and I'll say and the commit message will be what? What have I done? I'll say simple Webview implementation that supports loading from disk. And I'll push it to Garrett. And that's that. Also, I'll call it a day. I'll be on YouTube tomorrow doing some code reading.